Hi, it's Melanie here from Healthy Body Nutrition, here to talk to you more about my last post, which is how does food affect your mood? So I wrote a little bit about it in my post, but I like to come on and talk about it because there's always so much more that I like to dig into that I can't really get into when I'm just writing it. So first of all, neurotransmitter production. It's really, really important that you get enough nutrients to make your neurotransmitters. Now, amino acids are the starting material for your neurotransmitters, and you need various nutrient cofactors. Magnesium, zinc, B6, there's lots of them, but they're just a few. So if you don't have enough intake, so if you're not having enough, your children aren't having enough, protein can sometimes be a really challenging one for kids. Kids are what I call carbivores. They really like eating all those carbohydrate type foods, the snacky foods, because they're really easy to digest and they taste good. The other thing is if you do have poor digestion or absorption, eating adequate amounts is not going to get you what you need because your body's not able to utilize them properly. So when I'm dealing with kids in clinic and I'm trying to decide if there's any nutrient imbalances that are affecting neurotransmitter production, I ask some questions because quite often in kids it can present quite differently to adults and it comes up in behavior. So some of the things that I ask about are sleep, anxiety, have they got a lot of carbohydrate and sugar cravings? Is your kid the type that will climb the cupboard to get to the snacks, things like that, or in the middle of the night? Are they indecisive? Do they have any anger or rage? Is there perfectionism? Do they have a really low pain threshold or sometimes a high? And that can give us an indication of which neurotransmitters in particular your child is being affected by. Anxiety can really present in lots of different ways in children, again, very different to adults. So anger, lack of concentration, that indecisiveness can all be really signs of that. The next thing I like to talk about, this is one of my favorite topics about food, is blood sugar imbalance. It's not really talked about enough in my opinion. So when we have low blood sugar levels, it increases our cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So if you've got kids sitting in class trying to concentrate and they're hypoglycemic or they've got low blood glucose levels, they're going to find it really hard to concentrate. And when I talk about hypoglycemia, I'm not talking about like diabetic hypoglycemia, which is quite dangerous. I'm talking about those lower levels that can still affect behavior and concentration. So what I find a lot is if you're eating those refined carbs, cereal for breakfast, maybe something sugary for recess, a jam sandwich for lunch, they're not getting that protein and they're getting those really refined carbs that can get into the body really quickly. And what happens is the levels go up really quickly and then they come down really quickly. And what a lot of people think is when kids eat lollies, they get really hyperactive and everything like that. But what the biggest concern is actually the low blood glucose levels. So what happens is it gets into the system too quickly, your blood glucose levels go up too quickly, and your body responds in kind of like a panic mode because you need to get it out of the system. So your pancreas will release insulin, but what happens is it quite often comes down too quickly because it's in such a panic mode that it will bring it down really, really quickly. And what happens is they go up really quickly and then they come back down really quickly and they go too low. So then you end up on this roller coaster going up and down and up and down. And as I said, when they go too low, your body is going to release cortisol to try and bring them back up again. So one of the ways I know that my kids are a little bit hypoglycemic, and I can always tell when they haven't had their lunch at school, is when they come to me. One of them gets hangry. I can tell within the first 30 seconds of speaking to him that he hasn't had enough to eat because he's angry. And my other son gets really emotional. I find that he's complaining about things that probably wouldn't normally bother him, and he seems to have a really emotional response. So that's why it's really important to stabilize their blood glucose levels, avoid too many refined carbohydrates, and make sure you're getting adequate protein, not only for the neurotransmitter production, but to have that nice release of blood glucose. You want it to kind of be cruising along like that, not kind of jumping up and down. Because as I said, it's really, really difficult for kids to concentrate when their blood glucose levels are low. Again, with adults, you probably find you'll get a bit lethargic, you might crave carbs, but kids will get fidgety, they'll find it hard to pay attention, they might act out emotionally. So it's something to definitely consider with your child if you want to help with their mood. The next one is food intolerance. Pretty common food intolerances these days creates inflammation in the body. Your body can't break it down properly, and it triggers inflammation. Inflammation is going to affect the brain. It can cause lots of different behaviors depending on how severe they are, but some kids can get really aggressive, they can get hyperactive, they can have anger outbursts, and then can be really have inattention. And the other thing is that fatigue. So this is one thing I really noticed. I don't eat gluten anymore. When I did, I was always really, really tired, and I didn't really notice any different until I stopped eating it and my energy levels went up. So quite often when we're tired, we're not our best, and obviously that's going to really affect our mood too. So just another thing to consider. Food additives. If you follow me on Facebook and Instagram, you kind of know my gripe about food additives. It's kind of like food intolerances because the body can't break them down properly, and it creates inflammation that affects behavior. And here's a bit of information that I got from the Better Health website, which is run by the Victorian government, about food additives, and you can get onto betterhealth.vic.gov.au if you want to read more about it, about the food additives. So it's actually known that food additives can cause issues in some people. So I'll just read a couple of things that came off their website. 50 of the approved additives have been associated with adverse effects in some people. So obviously not everyone, but lots of people do find they have issues. Now there's gastrointestinal and other ones, but I'm just going to focus on mood. So hyperactivity, irritability and insomnia are associated with 50 of the approved additives in our food in Australia. The other one that really kind of grinds my gears is that it says most additives are tested in isolation for safety. The long-term effects of consuming a combination of different additives is currently unknown. Now, if you have a look at the packaged foods that you're consuming, you will start to see how many additives there are. It's a real big shame because additives are really brought in as a food safety thing when we needed to keep food from going off when it wasn't quite so available. But now there's flavor enhancers, stabilizers, like all colors, so many different additives that you can be eating 50, 60, 70 different additives in your food every day. So that's something that I would really recommend reducing if you have concerns about your child's mood and behavior. Nutritional deficiencies is a little bit just like neurotransmitter production. You need all the ingredients to make your neurotransmitters. So as I said, magnesium, zinc, B6 are really common. They're the really big ones for making your neurotransmitter cofactors. But also nutrients like, so omega-3 and vitamin E are really important for cell membrane integrity. And what you want is you want your cell to be the membrane to be kind of fluid so things can get in and out quite quickly. But without enough vitamin E and omega-3, it can be quite rigid. And what that means is you can't get the nutrients into the cell for it to work efficiently, but also it can mean that the communication between cells doesn't work quite so well either. So even if you've got good neurotransmitter production, maybe the cell's not being stimulated in the right way because it's not got all the nutrients it needs to function well. Iron deficiency is pretty common, that we know that it causes fatigue. Again, I remind you that fatigue can really, really affect your mood and children's behavior. The final point I want to make is about kind of overeating and food comas. So I think we all know what it's like on Christmas Day. If you've eaten too much, you go into that food coma. Makes you really tired, sluggish and irritable if you've eaten too much food, whether it's just too much food or too much sugar. You've had that massive sugar high and then the crash again. And then the other thing about food is how we can use it to improve our mood and how sometimes we can get kind of addicted to it. And food manufacturers have this thing and it's called the bliss point. They've created it to measure how much sugar they can put in a food to reach that bliss point where it tastes really good and it gives you that emotional response without it being too sweet. So they kind of engineer the food so it's at that right level. And what happens is when you're having those sugary foods, it's triggering the bliss point, which is actually dopamine in your brain, which is that real reward kind of good feeling neurotransmitter. So if you find that you're reaching for sugary, or even sugar and fat are like the perfect combination for triggering your dopamine. If you find that you're really relying a lot on comfort foods, that can be a sign that maybe you're trying to get that dopamine hit that maybe your body's not producing enough on its own. So I hope I've given you a lot to think about with food. The only thing I can recommend is just pay attention. See how you feel, see how certain things make you feel. And if it makes you feel good and you don't have a crash afterwards, go ahead. If it doesn't, then maybe it might be something to consider removing. So bye for now.